Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother Subhan, and welcome to the official MSA National Podcast. Alhamdulillah, today I am so honored and humbled to have two esteemed guests with us today. Inshallah, they are from Naseeha Mental Health Hotline. Naseeha provides anonymous, non judgmental, and confidential peer support for those experiencing personal challenges through their toll free hotline and education and outreach program in an effort to promote healthy connections in the community. I don't want to go too much into the intros of our guests. I want them to do it themselves, but I'm so happy to have Muhsin and Safia with us. So without further ado, guys, would love for you guys to introduce yourself, your roles with Naseeha, how long you've been a part of Naseeha, and all that good stuff, inshallah. How about you, Brother Muhsin?
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Subhan. It's amazing and wonderful to be with everyone today, talking about Naseeha, and we're hoping and we're praying that we do justice to Naseeha, and we're looking forward to getting the word out to the whole MSA national crowd. My name is Mohsen Karmali. I am currently serving as a director for Naseeha Mental Health and been at the role for almost 5 years now. And Alhamdulillah, we have been able to make some significant strides in Canada and looking to further that out into the United States. So that's a little bit of background about me. I focus more on fundraising and marketing and development. And inshallah, Sophia will be able to kind of introduce herself as well.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Safia. I'm going to keep mine short and sweet. I'm actually a part of the clinical team at Naseeha. I've worked frontline for over 2 years with experience on the helpline as a counselor. So really, I've been able to see some common themes and some broad challenges in our community through different levels. So hopefully, we can get an idea of what's been going on and how we can support you best.
Jazakallah khair, everyone. So obviously we've been doing these podcasts for a couple of years now, and as everyone knows, we like to get a little bit deep, and we're going to get deep, especially with everything that's going on, inshallah. But before we do that, I think at high level, there are people who may not even know what Nasiha is. Alhamdulillah, I've had the pleasure of, seeing the great work that Nasiha has done, which is why I'm so excited to bring this to light. But, Mohsin, I think it would be great maybe just to shed some light of what Nasiha is doing. How long has Nasiha been in service? Things of that sort.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of background history. Won't try to bore our audience too much here, but subhanallah, Naseeha actually started back in 2006, and it was an idea that generated under issues around what the youth of the communities are going through, and a couple of people got together. They created a helpline. It was primarily led and done voluntarily for a few hours. It started only on the weekends. Then they went to a Friday, Saturday, Sunday type model. And as the years progressed, there was more of a need and a view on the demand that, our youth were going through. So Alhamdulillah, in 2016, towards the tail end of 2016, Naseeha became a registered charity in Canada. And that really changed the layout of what the organization wanted to achieve as a registered charity in Canada. In 2019, Alhamdulillah, we then became a registered charity in the United States as a 501c3. So in North America, we are, registered as charities both in Canada and the US, and we're also zakat eligible. Some of, what you kind of talked to, about the services that we have to offer. Obviously, our primary main focus is our helpline, which is 1866 Naseeha. It is a peer support helpline that now, subhanAllah, we actually have paid staff along with volunteer staff operating that helpline, which is open 7 days a week. We just increased our hours this year to 3 a.m. So the hours of the helpline are 12 p.m. to 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It also serves as a text support line. So if someone is not comfortable talking to a counselor, they can actually text in. Alhamdulillah, we have, like I said, over 10 full-time, part-time support staff for the helpline, along with over 30 volunteers. And the goal for the helpline, inshallah, is one day to become 24/7, which we're hoping to get to in the very near future. Two of the other services that we offer, one up here in Canada is we started a web therapy program where we actually offer free therapy across Canada in multiple languages. So if you will, someone who's going through a little bit more than getting support on a helpline and they actually need to see a therapist, what we wanted to do is make it as accessible to people, barrier free, low cost. In this case, we offer it for free. And inshallah, we're looking to, manipulate that in a way that we can actually do that in the United States. So inshallah, the goal is hopefully we're able to raise enough funds and we're able to start testing it out in different markets. And then the third part of our service delivery is really focused around prevention through education and outreach. And what we try to do is we engage into communities, not only with the Muslim community at the mosques, but we actually try to get involved with, for example, public schools where there's maybe a higher population of Muslims. And we really try to educate our teachers, our staff, our parents around what is mental health, what are these issues that we're facing in the community, and really try to break that stigma around mental health and being able to openly talk about these issues. So that's, without boring us all that much, that's a little bit about what Naseeha is doing, what Naseeha is, a little bit of brief history, and where we're going, inshallah, is, like I said, we're trying to increase the hotline and helpline hours to 24/7. We really want to scale out our programming across North America, and we're really hoping that we can do that with the support of leveraging, this partnership with MSA National, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Well, yeah.
You mentioned a word that I think, even till today, I still see it as somewhat of something that should still be talked about, and that's the word stigma, right?
Yeah,
So much, Alhamdulillah, has changed when you look at maybe from 10 years ago till now. But even till
absolutely.
today, I'm sure, the younger generation, I think, is starting to get it. But
Yep,
parents of students and things like that, you may still see, there's no such thing as, mental health or this and that. And I'm sure you guys have heard all of it. I'd love for
absolutely.
you or Sister Sophia to share some light on why it's important to talk about this and how prevalent it really is in our own Muslim community.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, and Sophia, she can jump in as well. I think stigma is a big thing for us, right? And to your point, Subhan, the younger generation who have been maybe born and raised in a Western civilization or in Western culture, if you will, um, their view on what mental health is and their challenges they face very different than the view of, let's just say, their parents or their grandparents who emigrated from a different culture in a different land. And that's kind of where we're like at today. If you look at the lay of the land, we see a lot of clashes that happen as a result of that stigma. And the stigma really is around education, or lack thereof, almost an ignorance of sort towards mental health, right? Whereas in today's world, mental health should be viewed just as your physical health, right? I always use the analogy of looking at, like, for example, like a cold, right? When we have a cold or a headache, we have, we go to the cabinet, we pull out an Advil and we pop the Advil and our headache is gone, right? And that's something that's very commonly accepted. There's no stigma around that. But if you, for example, were to say, I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling sad and it's going to impact my work, for example, or you can't go to school, how would your parents feel about that? How would your boss feel about that? How would you be viewed? And that's where the stigma piece comes in. So we're trying to really normalize, mental health, making it part and parcel of your overall health, and really trying to bridge that gap between the two, call it the two age generations, right? And we see that um, there's a lot of distancing between those two generations, and as a result there's a lot of clashes, right? And that's why it's so important in today's world, because what we're seeing is a pretty big rise in complex issues within our communities, especially when we look at youths. And now it's actually going younger than age 18, but these problems are starting with kids who are all the way in their elementary school years, right? And the issues start developing and they start creeping in, and you I'm sure all the audience would be agreeing with this, that there's so many issues that we have from, you know, um, whether it be intoxication, addictions, whether we're looking at anxiety and stress. Some of this happens later on in life, especially during the university times, getting a job, finding a spouse, for example. After that, affiliations between families and issues, and then, we have these issues come up. And it's really important that we do our part as Naseeha to become advocates and raise awareness and really educate everyone. It's important to be, bringing everyone into the room. But our focus right now is a lot, has a lot to do with focusing on our parents, and their generation, to bridge that gap. So I hope that makes sense. But it's something that for us is very important, to be talking about these issues, and then really educating ourselves around what these issues are, and then understanding that, hey, as a youngster growing up in North America, my parents will have a very different view, and that's okay, right? And being able to actually openly talk about these issues, and then level up on both sides, right? And understand both sides. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit better for you. And Sophia, if you want to jump in and add to that, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely, Brother Mohsen. It's interesting because you literally took the words right out of my mouth. But in terms of, from my perspective, the prevalence of mental health issues in our community, I think people are becoming more educated on the fact that mental health challenges within our community are prevalent, as compared to before. I know in the past generations, you mentioned parents. I'm going to go back to grandparents for a second and
Yeah.
say that there was this lack of understanding of awareness of mental health being a thing. So,
Mhm.
for example, nowadays you'll hear some people say, the older generations, what do you have to be depressed about? Or like, just
Yeah.
make dua, it'll be okay, you'll be fine. As if there's no emotional aspect to feeling good or bad. That was kind of passed on to them as well, right? We're just caught in the middle of breaking that down, actually, and
Totally.
actually understanding that there is more to it than we thought. I remember hearing 10 years ago, approximately, that like mental health is going to be the new boom. But nobody actually knew what that meant. And look where we are today. And even in our own community, there are, as you mentioned, Brother Mohsen, several common themes for mental health challenges. Just having that cultural and like the faith aspect to our community, you can kind of see how some issues are more prevalent than others. And these issues are essentially what push us towards poor mental health and the challenges such as anxiety or depression. So I'm going to bounce off of an example that you gave about marriage.
Yeah.
Something common we see actually culturally is the pressure to get married, and at a young age too, because what will people say if you're a female over the age of 25, for example? That
Totally.
causes so much stress. And I remember the amount of individuals from university who went through this, and you could see like the low self-esteem. Some people got into toxic relationships, just to get to that end goal. Now,
Yeah.
what do you think would happen, right? Mental health challenges either way if you end up in a poor situation. And that's just one example, right? Like you mentioned, there are so many other examples of pressures and circumstances that we don't even talk about, such as, like you mentioned, family conflicts, there's spiritual guilt, there's addictions, behavioral or substance related, there's OCD, and then there's religious OCD, right? Mood
Yeah.
disorders, so many more things that we're just opening up ourselves to now. And if this is how prevalent mental health is within the community today, think about the opportunities of growth in terms of the support that we can offer.
Totally.
Oh, Jazakallah khair. Wow, that was beautiful, guys. And I really appreciate you kind of not only highlighting, but also sharing, some examples as well, Sophia. So I think, one way that I kind of want to now get even deeper is to kind of perhaps discuss maybe some of the most common issues that you guys actually are working on the field with, right? So I know we'll get deeper with those issues, but I would just love like to learn, because maybe there's someone, who's listening to this who may be going through this as well. I'd love to learn what are some of the most prevalent type of calls or texts that you guys typically get and deal with.
I can
I
go
think,
on.
I think Sophia would be perfect to answer some of these more in-depth frontline questions. So Sophia, go for it.
I think, you know, there is such a variety of challenges that everyone faces, and it's some people have complexity, so there are layers on layers, and we're looking for, you know, what's the priority that we want to tackle first. So we have things that range, we've seen things on the helpline that range from interpersonal conflicts. We've seen, you know, parent-youth conflict. We've seen marital conflicts. We've seen in-laws. We've seen a lot of different family related conflicts. Then we also have the spectrum where we go towards addictions, like I mentioned, behavioral or substance abuse. Then we have, you know, it can go all the way to career or education struggles. Some students are international students, some students are isolated, some people have parents that have high expectations, but they're unable to meet that, causes them stress, causes them anxiety. Once again, the layers, right? And then we're looking at the spiritual aspect. For example, some people might feel like they are not where they would like to be. Some people feel like they can do more. Some people feel like they can't do more, but they want to do more. And it all causes them to go right back to those mental health challenges, just because it goes back to how you feel about yourself in comparison to where you see other people, for example. So I think in the community, there are a lot of different issues. That do need to be tackled in terms of raising awareness, kind of understanding that being a human is, you're human, right? So you have to be able to understand that other people are human, but they also understand how you are as well. It's treating others how you want to be treated, but we go more in depth.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So there's layers to this, and we're obviously going to get deeper. But something, and we were obviously talking about this before we started, and we're obviously, inshallah, releasing this, at a time where, I can't go, 2 seconds without receiving a message on WhatsApp, a text, seeing an image, seeing videos, without, tearing up almost, with what's happening in Palestine. And of course, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant our brothers and sisters ease and sabr, and grant the martyrs the highest of paradise. But with that being said, I'm sure it's causing a lot of anxiety. It's causing, people to get overwhelmed, myself first and foremost, right? And it's not easy to see this constantly. I wanted to ask, if you guys have received any texts or calls regarding this, of students or teenagers or adults, whoever, just being anxious and overwhelmed, and what advice you guys may have for people who are going through this.
So I'll jump in, but I think Sophia is gonna be able to give a little bit more details.
Mhm.
But it's probably one of the hardest times. I'm just talking to fellow peers that I have who are my age, and I'm probably a little bit older than you folks. But a lot of people are struggling right now, Subhan, and to your point, myself, everyone's going through this on an individual level, but then collectively as a community, we're going through this. From a Naseeha standpoint, we have seen definitely an uptick in calls, discussions around what's going on in Palestine right now. Um, there's already, just in October, we're trending at a 30% plus call rate, just for this specific issues, and around Gaza and Palestine. Um, I think it's very important that people do their part in obviously supporting, but at the same time, there's a part that we need to make sure that we're taking care of, is at our own mental health, right? And how do we do that, right? While still being able to, grieve at the same time. So maybe Sophia can jump in and help with that, inshallah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there is a lot going on right now overseas, and we should just begin by being mindful of how others may be feeling at this time. This is a very heavy time. We totally understand that. And to put it into perspective, the impacts that world events like these may have on people, considering what's happening in Palestine. Like Brother Mohsen mentioned, 30% and rising of our calls at Naseeha in this month specifically have uniquely been about this situation. So we know that, there's a lot of distress, there's discomfort, there's sadness and grief involved, and it's absolutely understandable that it would impact us as humans. Now, a couple of ways so for example, what I mentioned above, like a little bit before, was, responses to these disasters. So things such as, feeling hopelessness, shock, anger, grief, guilt, it's just putting a name to it, right? And we do understand that it is absolutely exhausting. And that's why support is important to be able to access. Now, a couple of ways that, from the mental health perspective, to stay grounded in situations like these would be, first and foremost, something I always encourage: talk about it. Another important thing during these times is making sure you're also surrounding yourself with others, whether it be family, friends, or other people from the community. We want to make sure that while you're processing these things, you're also able to have a support system in place, right? Sometimes we find that another thing that could be helpful, for example, is limiting our exposure to, for example, social media for a bit, or news outlets occasionally, and that can help as well. There can be an overload of information and images that can cause us distress, and it's okay to take a break, which actually is another point about feeling guilty. Guilty that we're not doing enough or we're not learning enough. And it's really important to take things one thing at a time, and really taking care of yourself is something
I'm gonna add to that.
Yeah,
Because it's affected all of us. It's ironic that a lot of people don't think about this, but even the Naseeha staff, when we're hearing these calls and we're going through the same types of emotions, we need to be able to, help and talk about these things internally. So we actually have healing circles on our own end, right? So relating to me, like, from a perspective of, when Sophia, you talked about talking about it and surrounding yourself with a good support system, be it family or friends. um, I was, looking at a picture, and something that maybe Sophia, you can talk about, but certain things have actually triggered me with my past. As a young child, I happened to, lose my mother at a young age, and I remember vividly, specifically when we're talking about Gaza, there was a picture that came up of this young boy, grasping onto, um, you know, the his mom, who had passed away, and she was on the stretcher at the hospital, and it was so poignant, but it really triggered me. And I think for a lot of people who don't understand what a trigger is, and how to cope with that, there's layers upon layers, right? But it's interesting, because when Sophia, you talk about, maybe if you're alone and you're by yourself, you would feel it differently. And so kind of like right now, my wife happened to be on travels, and I happen to not be around people. I'm lucky, subhan, in the sense that I have staff who, are talking about this all the time. But I personally felt it. I actually, tried my best to kind of be with family, be with my nieces, be with that support, because when I was alone, I would feel it a lot more. And I would actually go down this path of, uh, being ultra sad, or feeling a sense of really, oh my God, like, I can't bear it anymore. And, to the point of limiting the time, what I did for myself is, I actually set myself to not look at, news, or try to avoid looking at social media, especially during the day, as much as I can. Given that I'm kind of in marketing, it's tough to do that, but limiting what I'm actually taking in, because it really affects you, and it could get to a point where it's actually affecting your work, right? So just some of the points that Sophia just mentioned are very good points to take back from a practicality perspective. So I just wanted to relate that personally. Like, and I'm sure I've been talking to people who have been giving me their stories. And it's important to note that, if you are going through these things, that this is why Naseeha exists, and you can actually, have the liberty, inshallah, of actually picking up the phone call and talking to someone on the other line who can help you through these emotions, if you will.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I'm just going to add on a little piece to that as well. It's as when you mentioned picking up the phone, the thing is we're on our phones and we're scrolling and it's so easy to spiral through that. And it's a tough situation to be in because you wish you could do something, you wish you could do more, and you're working on doing more, but then you feel like there are different types of spirals that you will see. But I feel like in addition to, talking about it, having a support system, pairing it with something that we've actually done at Naseeha before. It was called a Take 10 challenge, where you take a couple of minutes for yourself, and you pair all those three things together, almost like a formula.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody's formula is going to be different. So even taking out a few minutes a day for yourself, journaling, exercising, taking a nap, taking a shower, going for a walk. I'm sure everyone's told to do this for self-care, but you just got to find out what works for you and take that first step.
No, Jazakallah khair. That was beautiful, and I appreciate both of you guys even opening up and kind of going, about that. Like for me, one of the biggest things different now than maybe a couple of years ago is I've recently become a parent over the past couple of years. So now kind of viewing this type of stuff as a parent just really makes it much harder. And I think one thing that's helped me and hopefully could also help many of the listeners here is just gratitude. And giving that extra hug to your parents, to your brother, to your sister, to your kids if you have kids, just being thankful for what we have really really goes a long way. But I want to thank you guys really really really, number one, for just being there for people who are going through this stuff, right? As an MSA National, we're doing a lot of things on the field to serve different MSA leaders, etc., regarding what's happening in Palestine. So with this partnership in Naseeha, not only do we want to talk about subjects like this, but we also want to ensure that Naseeha is an opportunity for everyone who's going through something, right? So if you are listening to something and you're on the field, or you're a student, or you're an alumni, or whoever, if you are anxious, if you're depressed, if you're overwhelmed, or whatever you're going through, then I'm hoping by now you can see how genuine the team at Naseeha is and how willing they are to serve, inshallah. And it's all anonymous as well. So please, inshallah, look at the link in our bio, look at the description, and you'll know, and you'll see Naseeha tagged, and inshallah you can reach out. But now, guys, I want to get a little bit deeper. We only have about 20 minutes or so left, and I know this is something that I don't even think we mentioned the word, and it's not easy even for me as a host to talk about something like this, but I know how prevalent it is, and I'm sure it's even gotten more prevalent now than perhaps from even years ago, and that's suicide. I wanted to ask you guys, is this something from the Muslim community that you guys actually receive texts about or calls, just to break that stigma, of course?
Yeah, so I'm gonna take the first crack at it just from a higher level org standpoint. One of the reasons why we actually um, made the helpline into a text line is because we found that there was a lot of data around people opening up about talking about suicide, but there's still, though the helpline is anonymous, confidential, non-judgmental, um, we found that when we opened up the text line, data suggests that people are more likely to text about their issues of feeling suicidal or having those ideations at a 4 times more likelihood. So it's a 4x more. So subhanAllah, like just having the helpline being available as a text line, I just want to give some relevance and context there. From my angle, Subhan, and to the audience, one of the things that makes me super passionate about what we're doing is that I have personally seen the rise within our community, especially when it comes down to university students. And I'm sure many people who are listening to this would be able to relate that it's almost seems as if, as the years have been going on, there have been many more accounts of what transpires at the university level, where people get to a point that they are taking their life. And it's really sad. It's very hurtful. Um, and we all need to do our part, inshallah, to be able to help raise awareness, be there for your fellow classmates, make sure people understand that there are services out there. And if people don't are not feeling comfortable about using their services at point, they can call Naseeha, and that's what we're there for. One of the things that people should understand is that our counselors are trained, they're assist trained, they're also crisis trained to be able to deal with, you know, these types of issues. So suicide, it's, a couple of years ago, it was a very touchy subject within the community. I remember there used to actually be people in certain communities who wouldn't even allow us to say that word at their community. And subhanAllah, as a result of suicides in their community, they would call us back, begging us to come back. Please come help the community out. So from my take, it's something that's really at a very uh, important level for us at the leadership of Naseeha to be looking at, that we have seen an increase within our community. It just makes our work that much more impactful and more important to be able to, be advocating for educating our community. So I'll pass over to Sophia. She'll be able to kind of delve into the subject matter a little more deeply.
I absolutely agree with the fact that in the past little bit, there have been more conversations about it. It definitely is a tough topic. It definitely is a tough word. Now, at Naseeha, actually, according to our stats, so in this past year, we have gotten approximately, and take it how it is, but it's 150 texts approximately, and close to 300 calls relating to the topic of suicide or crises such as self-harm as well. And a lot of the times we'll see people have strong suicidal ideations or thoughts of self-harm based on what they're experiencing, and how heavily it depends on how heavily it impacts them and all of that. But then there's also, you think about it this way, there's this lingering thought in some people of, I just don't want to exist. I don't want to be here. I just don't care anymore. I feel lifeless. Nothing matters, right? One of our goals actually is to use this type of data to be able to better facilitate programming, because really we do want to know, and I'm sure the audience wants to know, what is it that is causing people so much pain, and to the point where they just would prefer not to exist, and how do we combat it? And of course, it's different for anyone, right? It could be anything, and it shows up differently in everyone. So the best and worst way that I can say it is different things impact different people differently. So what might feel minuscule to you might be the same thing that has taken my entire life's motivation away. And, that's kind of what we notice as counselors online. And Alhamdulillah, this is exactly why we work through trauma-informed perspectives. We're being mindful of how things affect others and to which degree.
No, Jazakallah khair. And I think that's such a powerful way to, close what you just said, Safia. You mentioned like different things affect people differently. And that just really goes to a common saying, treat others the way you would want to be treated. And I think that's definitely a takeaway message that hopefully all of us can really resonate with, that you never know what you may say to someone, although it may not mean much to you, what it could really mean to someone else. So kind of going along that chain, I'd love some light in regards to how to go about helping someone who may be going through suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety. I myself know people who've gone through, tough times in life, and I'm sure many of us can think of someone, may not be as much as suicide, but even if it is suicide or if it's just anxiety, depression in general, we'll love some thoughts on how we can help facilitate. Should we try ourselves to help them? Should we refer them to Naseeha? Should we get them, like what would you advise in these type of, critical situations?
So I could take on this part and, kind of talk a little bit about, when situations like these come up, we want to be able to look at certain risk factors. So, what are some reasons that may cause someone to want to suicide, or, what causes some people to be higher risk? Some examples, to note would be like financial strains, legal issues, substance abuse, losses of loved ones, for example, relating back to your personal situation, Brother Mohsin, bullying, a lot of different things, right? The list goes on, and this is just what we've seen in our community alone. Now, we want to be able to watch out for others based on these, right? We want to be also able to break down the stigma. We also want, as a community, to be working on raising awareness about, for example, oppression, discrimination. Like, there's so much work that needs to be done, and it's our own people that can help with this change as well, right? We have such innovative and proactive young people in our community that are literally the first step towards the change that can come into our community's mental health, right? And I feel like as we work towards making this change, we first have to be able to identify. So when you're looking for this, for example, identifying possible patterns of behavior, for example, so you would want to look for things such as, is somebody around extra hopelessness? Is there, are people giving away their items? Is there severe sadness? Are they experiencing withdrawal? So kind of withdrawing themselves, actually, so not being around anybody, losing interest in what they enjoyed before, maybe threatening suicide, self-harm behaviors. These are the warning signs, and you would have to see them given the circumstance, but it's important to be able to identify. So if I were to even give you some statistics, for example, let's talk about the US, of course, in relation to the population size. We can see that in 2020, almost 46,000 people died by suicide. Then you compare it to 2022, 49,500. That's a 3,500 people increase in 2 years. And that's just the US. If we talk about Canada, of course, given the population size, 4,500 people for 2023. If we want to look a little bit deeper, university students, we've heard stories and emails, we've seen emails indicating suicides on campus because of school stress, for example. But now, hear me out. We also have heard about the wait lists for therapy or wellness centers, and they are as long as can be, given how many students require support, right? I mean, speaking to a student on campus, I remember talking to someone, they mentioned that they kind of just had to pull through with their mental health just because they experienced it at the beginning of the year, but then by the time it was their turn to receive that support, for them, it was pointless. And I mean, as a student, think about it this way. You may have school stress, but that's just the beginning, right? There are so many more layers, as I mentioned. So you're a student, access to having support is important, but now you're helping your family pay for rent by working a job. You could be an international student that has challenges with moving to a whole new country. You may be finding it challenging to make new friends on top of being a student, working, moving. You're also feeling alone. So just let that sink in. And I'm just stressed thinking about it. Now you slap on a number, and across the US, approximately 24,000 college students attempt suicide. In Canada, you take that, 16% of students across Canada in educational institutions have considered suicide. Now, that's absolutely terrifying. If you look at the Muslim population, Muslims actually in the US are 2 times more likely to want to attempt suicides compared to other religious groups. You add on more layers: discrimination, disconnect with faith, cultural issues. But, the beautiful thing is that you see these organizations working to offer therapeutic supports with that common goal, right? Some people specialize in ethnic groups, by religion, by genders, by age groups, but the common goal is to help our community. And the beautiful thing about Naseeha, actually, ever since I heard about it, ever since I started supporting, was this idea that Naseeha acts as an outlet, not just for Muslims, for anybody. But we've seen, for example, reverts experiencing isolation, which causes them to, not want to exist. We've seen youth facing conflict and fearing speaking to their traditional minded parents or strict parents. We've seen wives and husbands with no support systems, you name it, and they all reach out to us because it was accessible. And by the end, we've heard, that people feel lighter, calmer, more hopeful after literally just having a space to speak. So you have the option of supporting individuals, but you need to know that if that support is not enough, we gotta be able to offer resources like Naseeha, like these other Muslim nonprofits, any other nonprofits, any organization that can offer that support.
Jazakallah khair. No, that was beautiful. And to even highlight Nasiha more, I'd love for you guys to kind of talk a little bit about this. I know there's many instances in which this happened, but a personal story. I was actually on a call with members of Nasiha just a couple of months ago, and I'll never forget that one of the brothers who I was speaking with literally told me that prior to our call, whether it's an hour before, the day before, he just finished talking to the team about a case of someone who wanted to end his or her life, and because of the great work Nasiha was able to do, they were able to kind of flip, mashallah, everything in that sort. So would love to hear maybe a success story of how Nasiha could be beneficial in that matter. And I know there's many, but if there's any that sticks or anything that you guys would like to touch upon from that regard.
I mean, I have quite a few. One that's more relevant to what we were talking about earlier about texting is, and also the expansion of the helpline. Um, you know, and Sophia will be able to kind of, back this up. But a lot of the issues around suicide or major problems also happen later on in the evening. So it was so important for us to increase our hours. And when we did that, we actually saw just recently, actually, we had someone who was going through ideation via text, and it was super difficult. But this happened after midnight. I believe it was almost like a 3 or 4 hour ordeal. And subhanallah, you know, these types of events happen. Another one that comes to my mind was earlier on in my experience with Naseeha. I'll never forget this one. It was vivid for me because it goes to show you the importance of something as small as our little bookmarks that we have that we pass out, and how important that is. I'll never forget this. There was a teenage girl, and again, we gotta also be careful because we need to make sure that we don't break confidentiality here. But there was someone in their late teens, who was in a state, and they felt hopeless, and they were dealing with moving to a new area, dealing with different cultures at home versus what they see at the mosque, dealing with school pressures, and they were ready to take their life. They were at that point. They were in their car, and subhanallah, like, it's a bookmark that they decided, because they had that bookmark, they saw the bookmark, they had it with them. They decided to pick up the phone and call Naseeha. And I'll never forget it because it was later on at night, and I happened to be in the office when the counselor took the call. And obviously after that, the counselor also was going through quite a bit after dealing with that type of a call. And we just sat down and we just had a little, a huddle there. But these are things, Subhan, and the audience, to Sophia's point, the 150 texts that we got this year and the 300 calls already this year, there are many instances, and each one of them are unique. Each one of them have impact to the counselor that's taking that call and to the rest of us at the organization. And that's what fuels our passion and our fire, so to say, our burning desire to make sure that we're trying our best and doing our best to raise that alarm bell, raise that advocacy, raise the awareness, break the stigma, have more people talk about this. So that's a little bit from my end. Sophia, maybe you can chime in and talk a little bit about any things that, any events or incidents that come to your mind.
I do remember one situation, And I'm going to keep this short and sweet because it's also lighter. We had a client, for example, that needed our support. One of our goals when you call us or you access our therapy services is that you don't call us, or you don't need to call us, because, you've been able to get to the point where we've guided you, we've helped you, and we've supported you in a way where you are able to support yourself. We've had individuals that have accessed our services that, will let us know, thank you. We really were at a low point. We really needed somebody to talk to. We needed somebody to bounce off our ideas with. And you know what? I'm ready to go. Thank you for your help. And it's good because they also know that if they do need that support again, we will be there for them.
I gotta jump back in because you sparked my memory on an event that took place, and it's very relevant to what's going on. SubhanAllah, I'll never forget this. We actually got a letter in the mail from Palestine.
Oh yeah.
Thanking us. And it was, I mean, excuse me, I might just get very emotional here, but I'll never forget that. And it just resonates so much right now with what we're talking about. They sent a thank you letter all the way. SubhanAllah, they were using our services in Palestine, and they were talking to one of our counselors. And they managed to send us a thank you letter from there. And it was surreal receiving that and being able to touch someone all the way across. And something for our audience to understand that we do have people who are able to access the service overseas, and we do take those calls, and we do support those people going through those issues. But SubhanAllah, imagine like right now what those people are going through, they can't even access our services. So just something that came to my mind.
SubhanAllah. No, Jazakallah khair to both for really, really talking about an important issue. And I know it's not easy. And that last story, SubhanAllah, is just so touching. And, as we conclude, I myself, have been going through a roller coaster of emotions, just kind of listening to everyone here. And I'm sure many of the listeners are. But as we kind of ended on a note, just as you just mentioned, Mohsen, I'm sure many students are wondering, like, what now? What can I do? Safiya, one of the things that you mentioned that individuals can do when they're in a situation is just talk, right? Not be silent, and or maybe joining a support group or something like that. And I can see many students, and I know for sure there are a bunch of students, because on MSA National side, we see how many leaders are stepping up and are wanting and willing to serve their communities and their MSAs. And I know just as important as that is, so is the dissemination of mental health awareness and helping those who are struggling. And I know what I'm trying to get at is I know there are many people who are listening to this, many of them maybe being students, alumni, working professionals who want to support the work that Naseeha is doing, the great work that Naseeha is doing, may I add. With that being said, Mohsen, I guess I'll leave this to you. What can people do if they want to be a part of it, from a charitable perspective, but maybe just also from an executionable perspective? If they want to be a part of the team, if they want to volunteer, what can they do? Maybe they're not a counselor, but they're a student, they have time. Would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Given the time that we have left, I'll try to keep it as quick as possible. But you kind of hit all three areas. One is, as I mentioned before, we are a grassroots-led initiative and charity. We are a registered charity in both countries, Canada and the United States. We're also zakat eligible. So one of the ways that anyone can get involved is supporting the cause. As little as $10 a month and becoming a reoccurring donor is something that I always tell people. Hey, that's something that we spend more money on bubble tea and Starbucks. And imagine, subhanAllah, $10 a month, when we did the calculation, equals $120 a year, as you all know. But that actually is the cost of one call. and that call can save a life. So a lot of times, when you think about money, you think, oh my God, I got to give so much money, and that's going to impact a life. In this case, amazingly, we have the ability to utilize very little funding to be able to support someone, and actually save lives. So that's one of the biggest ways to get involved, is to support Naseeha. Give your zakat or a portion of your zakat to Naseeha. Encourage, I'm going to encourage people who are going to university, young professionals, make it part. I mean, as Muslims, we have that built into us from a zakat and a sadaqah level. And we hope that you would consider this a worthwhile cause to be giving money towards. That's number one. Number two, I think volunteering is something that we are really looking forward to leveraging with the MSA National Partnership. We are going to be looking for, people who want to raise their hands and take on that challenge locally within their community to help Naseeha raise awareness, to get involved with potentially being part of the counseling team. We have the ability to take practicum students. So those students who are in, looking to become social workers or going down a path of psychotherapy, for example, or psychology, and want to do a practicum with us, they're able to do that. So you can do that in a volunteering perspective, right? And then obviously keeping in line with, hopefully, inshallah, getting a job at Naseeha, right? As we grow, we're going to need, paid staff, and we're always looking for people when the time arises. So keeping in touch with Naseeha through Instagram, social media is important, because we're always going to be announcing our events. It always gives people the opportunity to get involved. Hopefully, inshallah, we're looking to do something in the New Jersey area at the beginning of December, hopefully around the December 8th period timeframe, where we're looking to have people come out, and we're going to have a session on what Naseeha is, and also potentially have, a basketball clinic, but then do a little bit of a soft fundraiser as well. So we're going to need support locally in the New Jersey area. So if you're listening to this and you're in the, New Brunswick area of New Jersey or the Rutgers area, we'd love to hear from you. And one of the easiest ways is to just send in an email to info@naseeha.net. Anyone can remember that. If you can't do that, everyone's on Instagram these days, so you can just, DM us through our Instagram at 1866 Naseeha is our handle, and we'll be able to look, set you up with what different ways you can get involved. So many different ways of getting involved and supporting Naseeha, and just raising awareness around your community. Start with obviously yourself, and then whoever's closest around you. Being able to talk about mental health, is a form of helping as well, right? So there's many different ways that you can get involved, and we'd love to have people involved, especially as we look to, increase the awareness. One of the reasons why, MSA National is so dear to us is because, inshallah, we'll be able to leverage, MSA National's reach, and be able to actually, find those people, find those young Muslims who are active in their community and who understand the need and the importance of mental health and mental health awareness, and be able to, encourage them and welcome them to the team, inshallah. So many different ways. Definitely, we're always looking for support financially, but also from a human capital perspective. So, inshallah, if you are listening to this, take this message, take it out to your community, to your networks, and let people know of Naseeha, of the organization, how you can get involved, and how you can also play a role in participating and helping us advocate for a better tomorrow, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Well, everyone, I wanted to thank both of you guys sincerely for your time today, for your Naseeha today as well. But I wanted to give you guys the floor one last time, if you want, for any closing remarks as we conclude, inshallah.
I'm just going to jump in here and say a big thank you for your ongoing support to us and allowing us to support you. Thank you for, doing your part, and doing your part sometimes can be a small step, but even telling people about Naseeha, you don't know how big of a help that could be to someone else.
Alhamdulillah. That's so true. SubhanAllah. Just a quick story as we conclude. I remember I was actually at a mosque during this past Ramadan, and literally as I was leaving the masjid, a brother who I've never really met before just came up to me and just told me how he's been benefiting from the MSA National Podcast. And that particular episode didn't have a lot of views, but he was one of those few people who watched and benefited. So subhanallah, you never know who you're going to touch. And I think with that, as we wrap this episode up and of course post it, we're of course inshallah going to have Naseeha tagged, so you can click on the profile, DM them, email them, etc. But also through this partnership with Naseeha, we're also going to be disseminating various pieces of content, perhaps mental health awareness content as well, and things of that sort. So by simply just literally sharing it on your stories, etc., that goes a long way, because you never know who's going to see that through your Instagram story or through a WhatsApp message or wherever. And then they're going to, of course, land on Naseeha's page, and maybe they're going through something. And now, subhanAllah, look at that. They reach out to Naseeha and they receive, help. And you are now the reason they did that. So you never know who's going to be touched by simply sharing and spreading awareness. So if you are watching and listening to this episode, share it with a friend, share it on a WhatsApp group, share it with family. You never know who you're going to touch. With that being said, Jazakallah khair for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the MSA National Podcast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.